Welcome to the Sex and Space YouTube channel. We're about to show you a full video version of one of our awesome podcast interviews. You can check out the regular audio pod on all platforms where amazing podcasts are found. Be sure to hit us up with a like and subscribe, check out the socials for more content, and visit sexandspace.com to buy our book and our merch. All links are in the video description below. Without further ado, let's get into the interview.
Hey, thank you so much for joining today.
My pleasure.
When I came across you, I just couldn't quite take in how much you'd done.
Oh, well, with age, of course, comes experience.
Yeah, I do say that to people actually when they marvel at how much I've done. You don't get this old without having a number of lifetimes to live, right?
Exactly. I mean, I've been fortunate that my whole career, last 35 years, I've been spent doing something I love to do. So it's been great.
You have my dream job, I think.
It's been good. It's been a good run.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not done yet. I don't want to sound like I'm done. I'm always looking for, new things and started a podcast. So that was a, new place to kind of get the education out. So it's been good.
Yeah, absolutely. And also what's so heartening about the work that you do, I have a girlfriend who's in the field in a slightly different space. She's a Buddhist psychotherapist, but she likes the fact that she knows of practitioners who've been still working at 100. And there aren't many careers you can say that of.
I love that. Like when people talk about retirement, I'm like, I don't even know what that word means.
Nah.
Because as long as I'm enjoying what I'm doing, there's no such thing. It never doesn't really feel like work. It's so enjoyable that there's no reason for it to stop. If my mind goes, make me stop. But if my mind is sharp.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do, if I may, is I'll just actually borrowed from your own bio online. I'll just kind of do an intro. Sure. And then jump into asking a whole bunch of questions because amazing. Okay, so clinical psychologist originally by training.
Still. Mm-hmm.
And still, but that's where this journey began.
The journey began, actually, I was a social worker before I became a psychologist, and as a social worker worked in the field of child protective services and ended up working with a lot of sexually abused children and adolescents, and really got more interested in the field of sexuality because it was coming up in a different way, of course. And then I ended up going back to school because my initial degree was in psychology. So I ended up going back to school to do a master's and PhD in psychology. And then in between all that, did a training, like a 2-year post-grad training program in sex therapy, sex and marital therapy.
Wow. Oh, look, I can do the intro later. I'm just going to jump straight in because I sort of started, but that's a really interesting start point. If we go back even further, what was it that led you into the social work space, into the kind of space of working with others?
Well, I think I always wanted to do something to help. I think it was in my nature. My mother worked for a social working agency, not as a social worker, but I was around that a lot. And I think that was part of the inspiration. My mother was always a very giving, nurturing person to other people. I saw that growing up. So to me, it was a natural fit that I would do something in that vein. And then just the interest in sexuality, I think I've always been fascinated with it, even as a youngster, as a teenager. I was the one that the friends would come to and ask, hey, I don't know what to do in this situation. How do I do this? And I was like, not that I'm the expert, but I'll find the information for you and I'll talk about it. So it was just the ease in which I had to talking about it that I think kind of brought people to ask me questions, which then led me to do research, looking into these things. And it just became it just kept feeding into it. And then when I got to university, I just met we had a professor who was teaching a human sexuality class. It was the only class at the time at McGill University, actually, which is interesting, but it was the only class, and I took it and I was like, oh, I'm like, this is for me. And I was like, what did you do? How did you get to be who you are? I want to follow in your footsteps. And that's exactly what I did. I got my training where she got her training, same mentor. And and then I just didn't go into academics, but my career evolved in such a way that it happened to me rather than me seeking much out, to tell you the truth. Like the opportunities just came up, and one door opened up, another door opened up, another door. So very early in my career, and I was a young sex therapist at the time, I was going to conferences all over the world. I was probably the youngest one there. I was 24 or 25 years
Wow.
old. And I was like, nobody, today though, you have like tons of sex researchers who are in the field, because it's become a field in the last 35 years. When I was there were much older people involved in this field. So, and early in my career, I got the opportunity to do local radio here just by pure accident. I was working at a clinic, at a sex clinic, a sexual dysfunction clinic. And in walks a guy from a radio station saying, oh, we have this show, it's about relationships and we want to move it into the sexual realm. Anybody here, any of you interested in doing it? And I was like, okay, I'll try it. I was like, it was a little scary, but I said, I had a motto that if it's scary, do it. Like that was it. Just do it. What's the worst that can happen? You sound like an idiot for once and then you stop doing it, whatever, So I did it, loved it. And, it's fielding questions off the cuff, right? You're and that kind of thing. So I did that for like 9 years. And then I was offered my own show on another radio station, which was a nightly show. So for 22 years, I actually did a nightly radio program in Montreal and in some of the border United States and other places in Canada, where I answered people's questions and talked about sex every single night for 22 years. It just ended my run not that long ago. And then so that door opened up televisions. I did a lot of television. I had my own TV show for 2 seasons, and then, been an expert on many, many TV shows and documentaries and things like that. So it's been like, it's just been a medium. It just put me in the position where I'm teaching the public. So I had to, it's not clinical. It is clinical, but I have to bring it to the ears of a public that may not have the language.
Yeah.
So that was the thing for me that I really enjoyed doing, is how do you explain difficult concepts and embarrassing concepts and awkward conversations? How do you bring that and make it less awkward and make it so that it's part of everyday language? And so that's been my goal for my whole entire career. And then, then wrote a book and then got involved with Pornhub and started doing like, just how do I reach more people and how do I get this information out in the most efficient way? That's been my that's what's been driving me.
It's amazing, and it sort of describes the purpose of what we're doing over here.
Okay.
It's why it's called Sex in Space. It's to create spaces for conversations and to find the people out there like you doing this incredible work and give it visibility and say, look, there's this, right? And then to create a space for people to hear what you have to say, and to hopefully supply some tools from that they can think about or find out where to get.
Yeah, exactly.
In order to backfill those spaces, the stuff we never got taught. But it sounds like you might have had some grounding in sex education through family or somewhere. Like, what made you feel so comfortable talking about it? No?
I wish no, that's the funny part, is I had immigrant parents who sex was not really a conversation. I mean, my father is the one who told us how babies are made. But that's as far as it went. We were never shamed. Like I never got the sense that sex was shameful or anything, but we didn't really have the educational tools. Like the only thing I could tell you is that my father used to sell encyclopedias and would bring home encyclopedias for us. So I spent a lot of time reading encyclopedias and looking at the anatomy parts of it, so I was very interested in that sciencey thing, but I never went into sciences, but that certain parts of science really made a lot of sense to me, and I wanted to know more. So I didn't really grow up with that. I think I was just a naturally curious child. And then as a teenager, sexual curiosity, I did all I can remember all this time is I never grew up with this shameful feeling or like sex is sinful somehow. I always knew sex was for pleasure. I always felt that should be the case. And so I think it just became easier for me to accept me and just be strong in my identity. So I think I was at a young age. I had that confidence, and or at least I pretended to, I don't know, but I felt that it was something that was driving, and I didn't really care what people thought. I always had that, like, I don't care what you think of me. Like, you could call me whatever you want. Back in the days, there's a lot of more slut shaming even than there is today, believe it or not.
Oh yeah. Well, yes, having grown up in probably a similar era, it was not okay. Other side of the world in the UK, for young women to be sexual.
Or even to talk, they were sexual though. That's the interesting thing. Like if you look at the statistics, like in 60 years, it hasn't changed. Like the age of first sexual experience has not changed in 60 years. We just didn't talk about it back then,
Yeah,
or
and it was shameful.
Or you were pointed out as you're the one having sex. Yeah, but you also having sex. You're just not putting it out there. Like nobody knows about it. You're doing a lot of stuff in secret. So
with there's a wonderful TED talk you did, TED Montreal, where you sort of described the arc of a lot of what we're dealing with through the work we're doing here. And one of the things you talked about, which I loved, was the way that sexuality changes across the lifespan.
Yes.
Was there an aha moment for you about that in your work?
I think the aha moment came, well, when it comes to sex and aging, yes, a little bit. So I wrote a book called The Sex Bible for People Over 50, and it was a very timely book because I wrote it when I was 50. And I was motivated by older patients that I would see who would say to me things like, ugh, I'm not going to bother with that. I'm too old. I'm like, how old are you? Oh, 55, 60. I'm like, how could you give up on something that feels so good? Like, so that was like the aha moment of like, do people actually give up? Like they just think that there's an expiration date. And I'm like, no. So I dug deep and looked for research and all the stuff that was out there that talked about how sex is better when you get older and how all of that stuff. And that was one of the great motivations for me. As I said, I'll be damned if it's just going to end right here. Like that's not going to happen. So that was the motivation for that. But I think a lot of it is I see a lot of people in my practice and over the years who have very unrealistic expectations of what sex should be, and like I'm seeing a couple now, they've been married for like close to 20 years, and the guy's like, I just want to feel that burning passion for you. And, I'm like, I looked at him, I said, that's not going to happen. Like you can have blips of passion throughout your marriage, but you want the same burning passion you had with her when she was brand new to you? Like that, you're being unrealistic. And she knows he's being unrealistic. And he has this image of, yeah, but I want to live my life to the fullest and I want to have all of this. I'm like, then you shouldn't have chosen to get married, or you should have known. You need to understand how marriage works and the evolution of that and the choices we make and how to enjoy the moments you're in and all of that. So that really struck me as something that, if you're always looking for more and more and more, and there's this expectation of what it should be, you're never satisfied. Now, I'm not saying stay in something that you're in an abusive relationship or something's bad. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying here. But so I think our expectations get in our way of our healthy sexuality, whether it's expectations that I should last a half an hour of intercourse. You know, that's what my partner wants. Is, have you asked your partner what they want? Because that's not what they're going to say. You know, and then giving them the real facts. Like, did you know that men only last between 2 and 5 minutes of intercourse? That's average? Like, what you're seeing in porn is not what's in real life, you know, or men who continuously ask me about how to grow their penises. And when I ask them, well, how big are you? And they're, well, I'm like 5-6 inches. I said, that's average. Why do you need to be more than average? The women don't care, not that much anyway. Like most women, average is perfectly fine and good. So there's all these preconceived or these expectations that do get in the way.
The am I normal question.
Oh my God, that's every time.
Yeah, that's everything we do, everybody we talk to, that's the burning question. Am I normal?
Why though? The reason why it comes up is because nobody talks about it. So for example, here's a perfect example of am I normal? 35 years ago, so I started pre-internet. We didn't have the internet. Back then, I would see people who have fetishes. So whether they were into BDSM or they were into adult babies or whether they were foot fetishes. So they felt like freaks. They felt like something is weird with me. They would come to me because they were distressed. Am I the only one in the world like this? Like, why is this happening to me? I don't understand it. Fast forward 35 years, I never see a fetishist.
Right.
And the reason is because they find a community online. So when they Google foot fetish, they will see, I don't know, 500,000 pages of other foot fetishes and sites. So they're like, oh my God, like there's a whole community, there's an entire population out there. So suddenly they are not distressed by what they feel because they realize, oh, okay, this is just part of normal. I may be on the edge of normal, but I'm, you know, because so many other people are involved, then I feel normal.
Isn't that interesting? So is it that people who are at the edge of normal, whatever that means, are finding comfort and connection through the internet, and yet those in that kind of mass of the hump of so-called average aren't necessarily doing the same thing? So you're still seeing people saying, am I normal? Can I grow my penis? One of the most searched Google items, by the way.
Is what?
Can I grow my penis?
Oh, can I grow? Of course. I mean, I get that question on a weekly basis for sure.
Really?
You're right. So yeah, I still get that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. We just posted a video actually on our Pornhub Sexual Wellness Centre with a urologist who's actually doing a study looking at methods of growing. Which is going to be interesting. But who, like if you listen to the program of what you need to do, putting weights on for 8 hours a day, like who wants to do all of that? It just sounds a little bit nuts. But you're right that the average person are asking themselves more often, is this normal or not? Because it's easier to know that the rest of the population, like not everybody is into feet. So right. You're going to go check and look for the other people who might be like you. But if you're having pain with intercourse, or you don't have much desire, and you just feel, and you're comparing yourself to your partner or to what you see in the media, then yeah, the question is, I don't think I'm normal, right? Yeah. And 9 times out of 10, everything falls within I hate the word normal, healthy, unhealthy, whatever it is, but it falls within the norm. And I can't tell you how many times women, especially women, have sat in front of me and I've said to them, well, what you're describing is perfectly, that's how 75% of the female population feels or thinks or feels or experiences. And they're like, and then the tears start to flow. Like, I've been suffering for years, feeling like I'm not normal for years, when all I would have had to do is speak to you for 5 minutes and got the real deal. So that tells me that there's such a lack of education and such a lack of information that people, just like adults, forget the sex education of young people, but where do we as adults get our sex education?
Absolutely. And so the piece that you just said before about desire, I love that. Again, that TED talk where you spoke to the difference in passion at the beginning and then desire, and how you have to work at that. You want to talk to that a bit, because
Yes.
your analogy was gorgeous.
Right. So I don't remember which analogy I used then, but sometimes I use the restaurant or the car. I don't remember.
It was the gym.
Or the gym. Okay. So, right. So in that TED talk, I talk a lot about how desire becomes less spontaneous, meaning that horny feeling of like, oh, I want you now, and becomes more responsive, at least for women, but also for some men.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is women are less driven by just this throbbing in their clitoris. I'm so horny, I need to have something inside of me kind of feeling, you know,
Yeah.
versus when we engage in sex, like then I start to feel good, that arousal triggers the desire. That's the difference. And there's a transition. We transition from one to the other. Men transition less, like oftentimes they stay with the spontaneous desire for sex. Again, not all, but for the most part, yes. So they have a hard time understanding how their female partners might not experience that. So they send them to get help. What's wrong with you? You don't have any desire. I desire you. How come you don't desire me? It's not that they don't desire their partner, because they'll all say like, yes, I'm attracted to my partner. Yes, I'm interested. So I make the distinction between someone's interest in sex. If they tell me that they want to, that shows an interest in sex, right? So there's a difference in interest and the spontaneous desire. So once women understand how their desire works, and if they would put themselves in a situation, albeit that everything else is okay in the relationship, I'm not saying force yourself to do anything, then, once they put themselves in that situation and they allow for the stimulation to occur, and they make the conditions right. It's like, this is why thinking about it, putting it on your radar and planning for it are all good measures. Yeah. So once that gets going, then that kind of kicks in the desire. So the other analogy I like to use is hunger, because it's kind of like a hunger, right? So you may not be hungry for sex. Doesn't mean you shouldn't eat. You may not be hungry at all. So let's say your partner is always hungry. Your partner suggests, honey, I'm hungry. Could we go to the restaurant? I want to go eat at the restaurant. The partner says, well, I'm not really hungry, but I'll accompany you and maybe I'll nibble. So you get to the restaurant and, your husband orders this really nice steak. He's like, can I have a bite of that? So you take a bite of the steak. Oh, that's so good. You know what? I'm going to order myself that same steak. You've suddenly opened your appetite. Now you're enjoying a beautiful meal. Yeah. So it's very much the same when it comes to sexuality.
Yeah. Yeah. And in terms of the way in which we understand the range of what sex is and means as we get older really shifts, yeah, or needs to shift in order to accommodate the changes of us.
Yes, exactly. So if you just give up simply because it's not the same anymore, that's like giving up walking because you're not walking as fast as you were before, right? Or giving up jogging. Maybe you used to run real quick, but now you have to slow the pace, or whatever sport you do. Your body ages. Our bodies age. We have to embrace those changes. We may not like them very much, but they are happening whether we like it or not. And I always say, what's the alternative? You could be dead right now, so you might as well appreciate the fact that you're aging, because it's a blessing. So that's me always thinking kind of more in the positive way. But yes, changes happen, which means that you have to readjust and also expand your definition of sexuality. So maybe at a certain point you can't have intercourse anymore because, I don't know, diabetes has ruined your ability to have an erection, whatever it could be, or too much pain with intercourse or whatever it is. That doesn't mean you give up on sexuality. You just redefine what sexuality is. So how are we going to do this? What gives you pleasure now? What gives you pleasure now? Like, we need to be able to talk like, this doesn't feel good to me anymore. Could we try this? So it doesn't have to be about intercourse. There's so many acts that you can do that are sexual in nature, that simply lying down naked together. I always say anything you're going to do, anything that you would not do with your brother or your sister is sexual. It's okay. Like, go do everything else, right? So just lying down naked is part of sex. So expanding one's knowledge and expanding one's definition is really important. Knowing that there are solutions to things. So whether you have erectile dysfunction or you have a vagina that's thinning and atrophying and you lack hormones and whatever, there are solutions to all of these things. They may not make it perfect or restore you back to what you were at 20, because that's an unrealistic expectation, but certainly can make it so that you're enjoying and you continue to enjoy sex.
Yeah. So if you were describing an essential toolkit for people long term in order to enjoy healthy sexuality, what would you put in the kit bag?
So in the kit bag, I would put how to have a good open conversation. So a little booklet about how to have a conversation about sex,
Yeah.
you know, how to be able to talk about your needs and express your needs. I would add in there some props to help with aches and pains. So, you know, they make kind of wedges or pillows that get propped up, or things that you can adjust your positioning. So for positions, I would definitely add sex toys in there, because for example, women need more clitoral stimulation as they get older, because we start to have a little more of some women experience something that feels like a deadened clitoris, or the nerve endings are not as sharp, let's say, or what have you. So adding extra stimulation, because if you're aging along with your partner, your aging partner's tongue and fingers don't move as fast either. Right. So you got to catch up, right? So you got to use other things. Yeah. So using toys, that would certainly be in there. Lubricant, yeah. Silicone lube would go in there. That would be my basic toolkit for sure.
That sounds like a good kit bag. Actually, there's a website called Hot Octopus who do sex toys for people who aren't necessarily as dexterous as using them anymore, which is cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, because like and also one of the things with new sex toys I realized with older people is they often come, they're rechargeable or chargeable, and older people don't necessarily expect that. They're expecting something with batteries, and some of them are so subtle in terms of where you plug them in. It's almost invisible. And so there's some education about that too. These are the new toys. This is what they look like. This is how they work.
Yes, exactly. A guidebook to using these toys. Exactly. That's a very, very good point. And also, I don't know if there was a Netflix series called Grace and Frankie. Are you aware of that? Okay. So, this is a couple of old women in their 80s or 70s or 80s, and they created a line of sex toys for women with arthritis.
Absolutely brilliant.
So that they'd be easy to use, and I was like, that is brilliant. I hope somebody's really making those toys.
There's a wonderful brother-sister partnership in, one's in Canada and one's in Sydney, and we just talked to them, and they have an organization called Handy, and they're going to be next year releasing the first of its kind sex toy for people with disability who can't hold sex toys, made by people with disability.
Amazing.
Yeah, super
amazing.
cool. Yes, so we'll be looking to help put some big plugs out around that, but there's good work happening in that space. I think.
Well, you see, as people are aging, as the population, there's more aging people than there are younger people in terms of baby boomers and such, and I'm at the tail end of the baby boomer generation, but we are the advocates for this. Like, we have to insist and we have to fight for things that we want, whether it's open discussions about sexuality, whether it's having our doctors talk to us about sex, whether it's making sure nursing homes allow for spaces to have sex in, where we're training people, where we have LGBTQ training for nursing homes and seniors residences. And I mean, seniors residences are a hotbed of STIs right now. There's a lot of sex happening there.
There is.
There is. I give talks there. I bring my books. I bring condoms. I give them safe sex talks like I would to a class of teenagers.
It's a really interesting space because one of the tensions there is when children are basically in charge of their parents in that space, they start to try to intervene in their parents' sexuality. It's like this complete reversal.
That's right. And I'm taught, and when I say, hey, adult children, are you having the sex talk with your parents? Because you need to. You know, the same way they should have had them with you with safe sex, you need to have that talk with them. And you need to let them explore their, it's more about accepting that you are sexual when you are older, the same way parents have to accept that their kids are sexual.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. But we're very ageist as a society.
Oh yeah, there's so much ageism, It's rampant, really.
And in our own heads as well, you know. Yeah. It lives inside us.
Well, we have to change that, right? So changing attitudes takes generations. So me and you and our cohort, we got some work to do.
Sure do. And so the place I found you was Pornhub, actually. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that project.
So this was an amazing project. So it's the Pornhub Sexual Wellness Centre. So basically it was like somebody match made us together. So there was one person who was familiar with the Pornhub company and with me, and I was looking for a project. They were looking for a community project. So not a money maker, not like just they tend to do find projects that are good for the community. I know it can sound a little paradoxical, but we're not going to have that argument or debate. So they were looking for something, and so we met, and we came up with this idea together to have a space where all those people that are going to porn, all those people at whatever age, but we made the assumption it's 18 plus, that's who we were dealing with,
right?
That they should have a space to go to that will give them the real deal on sexuality. I wanted the balance. It was abhorrent to me that this is where people get their knowledge from. When you look at the statistics, this is where the majority of people get their information from. So this is dangerous if this is happening. Mm-hmm. So let's create a space where those same people, while they're navigating their porn, can find us and ask questions and look at science-based, evidence-based information. So that's what we did. We created it about, I don't know, I think it was 5, maybe 6 years ago. Wow. It's been hugely successful. Successful in the sense that the reach has been successful. We've reached a lot of people. This was done for the Pornhub community, for people already going there. It wasn't like we were accused at the beginning, this is a marketing scheme, it's a gimmick, it's a this, nothing of the sort. They don't make money from it. There's no advertising on it. It bypasses all the porn. You go right to it. And it's filled with thousands of pages of information from valuable sources from there. Everybody who contributes to our site are doctors, nurses, educators, physios, everybody who works in the field of sexuality, not just writers and bloggers and what have you. I have nothing against them, but they do their research well, but that's not what we wanted. We wanted to differentiate and to really have a site where you can speak to the experts directly. And then we have a Q&A on that site where I answer people's questions. So they submit them, I answer them. We just started a video series, a sex education video series, where we visually will show people how to put on a condom, how to negotiate condom use, how to have the conversation about monogamy or non-monogamy, all kinds of stuff. So we're actually like the how-to videos are in there as well. So it's an ever evolving platform. On there too is people have access to my podcast, which is called Passion with Dr. Laurie, which talks about sexuality. We release an episode once a month. So that's that gets hosted there too, although it's available on all the other platforms. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful project because it has reached people from all over the world, where in a lot of places where there's zero sex education, zero access. And I could tell because the questions I get can be so basic, so basic.
Can you give us some examples?
Like, can I get pregnant from just rubbing on the outside of our clothes?
Wow. Okay.
I mean, many things. Like, if I like anal sex, am I gay? I can't even think. There are just so many questions about periods and like, I could see that a lot of people who write are young, although our site is not to reach those people, but I can't help who comes to the site either. Okay. Like, we know that youth are accessing porn. I'm grateful that they're able to get to this site, which actually has real information for them if they're there anyway, right? So
yeah, totally.
Yeah. But we have like sections where there's basic anatomy. So we go through the basic anatomy of men and women. We go through STIs. We go through like some, like almost like sex ed 101. And then it gets more and more explicit. I don't say explicit, but like more variety of the kinds of things we talk about.
It's an absolutely brilliant project. And I think I would encourage anybody listening who's curious or has questions to go and have a look at it. It's and also to read your book. Anybody who's approaching 50 or over 50, definitely a book to read, because a lot of what's going on is, as you said, it's making these words, questions, conversations normal.
Yeah.
It's just giving space to actually ask these things and to, get some sex education that we never got.
Right. And especially when it comes to the book, for example, I really made that book for couples because to open the conversation, there's short chapters. It's like, hey, let's read this in bed together. It has pictures in it, tends to keep the guys interested. So it's it's a self-help book that isn't like a big, thick book. It's easy to read and it's solution focused. So it has like, here's the problem, here's the solution. Let's try this. Oh, let's do this homework. Let's do that homework. So and it opens conversations. So for me, that's the most important, is that you're able to have these conversations together and then work from there,
Yeah, it's interesting, the conversation piece. This whole project started with a piece of research I did called Conversations with My Lover.
That's amazing.
It was about how we're at our most intimate, we are often at our least articulate. And we're very poor at being able to say things even like that feels good or that doesn't feel good. It's the shame piece that you talked about. You don't talk about it. There isn't a vocabulary for it.
Right.
And that was where this originally started, and then it moved to understand that actually the gap is educational as much as conversational. So we shifted gear. But that education about language, being able to have the words and to understand our own anatomy, your early curiosity with encyclopedias.
Yeah.
My first job was selling those, by the way, or one of my.
That's great.
I love them.
Yeah, and I had the insight. I had two sources of knowledge. I had my encyclopedias, thank God, but I also had Cosmopolitan magazine.
Oh my!
Do you remember that? So back then, that's all. Like those were like very salacious articles and like how to give a guy a blowjob. Like there's all kinds of things, right? So I was like a voracious reader of those magazines. So I think I learned quite a bit. I don't know if it was good information, but it was some information nonetheless, right?
Well, it's funny, Cosmo, one of the articles, one of the things that set me on a journey around sex ed and why it's so important to kind of have an unpacking of the narratives in what sex tells us, especially porn, who we are and how to be, how men should be, how women should be,
Mhm.
all of that stuff. And there was a Cosmo, I was a very young mother, and I had a young daughter, and there was a Cosmo article, how to have anal sex comfortably.
Right.
And I was horrified because it was about how you do this for him. I wasn't horrified at anal sex. I was horrified that the framing of this was, you know, if it's uncomfortable, learn how to get comfortable so he can enjoy it.
Oh, geez. Okay. You're
That was
right.
back in the day, but you know, how to give him a blowjob. Those
Yeah, it
magazines.
was always about him. It was never about the female pleasure. And that's been a big lack in our education. In fact, that we don't talk about pleasure, and women think they have to suck it up. And if it hurts, too bad, you know, like suck it up because sex is for the guy, which of course we're thankfully, I hope we're not teaching our girls that. I certainly didn't teach my girls that. So it better feel good, because don't do it if it doesn't feel good. It's for you too. So it really, we have to, there is a shift in the way we're viewing female pleasure and talking more about female pleasure. And I don't know about you, but in my circle, I hear women and my friends, and we talk about sex toys, and we, hey, what's your favorite sex toy? Or somebody will come say, oh, I got this great new sex toy. You got to try it. It's like 2 seconds, you know? And so we're having these conversations.
Yeah, slowly. I think maybe for some groups of women, that's true. And then for others, this is yet to be had as a conversation. There are parts of the community where it's still culturally not okay.
Right.
Where there are really strong constraints that are faith-based.
Yes, of course. And I'm talking about my, you know, of course it's me. So who's going to be attracted to want to be friends with me? If you're really shy and embarrassed about sex, you don't want to be around me. Like that would be way too triggering, you know? So yes, it's maybe particular to my friends group, but nonetheless, I'm hearing more people talk about it, more people open about their sex toy purchases and such, but that's in some parts of the world. We have a whole big world out there. Like you just pick the US and you can divide that into those that never talk about sex, but do a lot of stuff behind the scenes, but yet will not talk about it. And those who are more liberal. So yeah, there's culture, religion, so many. It's so complex, really, when you start to break it down.
It is, and we're very privileged to be having these conversations without threat or fear for our lives in having them, which is, you know, going on in other countries.
Quite true. I mean, I don't know about you, but I still get the occasional hate mail because some people still think I'm the spawn of the devil because I talk about sex openly, but it is so little, like it's much less than I would have ever anticipated. So that makes me happy.
Yeah. Talking with a young woman in Beirut the other day, it underscored the radical privilege that we have because they can't even talk about rape.
Imagine.
You know, without and having not only been given death threats, but men with guns come in and put guns to their heads because they were having conversations like that. And so
we have to realize how privileged we actually are to be able to at least have a discussion, at least have places to go when something happens to us as women and such. So
in your years of working in therapy, have you noticed amongst what's the continual themes, like, is my penis big enough and can I make it bigger? Has there been a shift in some of the things that are presenting to you?
The biggest shift that I have seen is that my clients are getting younger and younger.
Right.
So yeah, early in my career, I would see older people with problems. Now I see a lot of people in their 20s
right.
and 30s with lots of questions, lots of relationship kinds of issues, lots of performance anxiety. I've never seen so much anxiety in my life than in the last, 10, 15 years, especially when it comes to sexuality. So performance anxiety is in men, very common, very common. In men like under 30, for sure. I blame in part expectations of pornography and what they have absorbed in terms of what they think it should be and not measuring up and not feeling like they can measure up. I blame a lack in social skills training because they're always on their damn freaking machines, and then they can't. I sound very old when I say things like that. I mean, I'm on my machines too. I don't want to, but when there's no practice to be out there and to socialize and to learn some of those skills necessary for relating romantically. So there's a few issues out there, that are preventing people or making them anxious to get into real life relationships. They're fine behind the screen. They're not fine in real life.
The absence of any conversation around sexual pleasure and how our bodies work in pleasure terms in school education seems like a massive gap still. Is there work in that space where you are?
Well, there's a massive gap in discussing pleasure in education for sure. So I live in Quebec, and I'm part of an organization which we're an advocacy group for sexual health education in schools. And one of the things that we bring up, of course, is talking about pleasure and talking about consent.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
like consent is the big one. I was just doing a podcast, recording one today, and looking at how many boys, like how many girls feel that the boys pressure them constantly to send nude photos, for example. So sexting has become a real issue where where boys are like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And this is what girls are expressing. Like, where's this? Why aren't they getting this notion of consent? You don't push somebody until they submit to you. That's not, and then they say, yes, just shut you up. That's not consent. Like,
No.
they have to understand what consent actually means and the consequences of what they're doing. I just think that teenagers need to be taught. We need to have these conversations more and more with them, because they don't have the natural ability to make sense of this stuff. Their prefrontal cortex isn't quite developed yet. So they're full of impulse, they don't have impulse control, and they're not great problem solvers. And so mix all that together, and you're going to get kids getting into trouble all the time based on their curiosity and their horniness.
Yeah, it's and consent's massive and important, and it does seem to be getting some airtime now, which is great. It's just pleasure seems to be yet again getting sidelined. I know
female pleasure.
Yeah, although in sex ed, pleasure full stop, it feels, I had a look at the new curriculum out here, and it's good, but it doesn't deal with pleasure.
Which is crazy, because why are teenagers having sex? Why? To make babies? No, there's only one reason they're doing it, because it feels so damn good. So they're neglecting the entire reason why people are having sex. Like, how about we admit that, yes, it feels good. Of course it feels good. That's why we're having sex. But something can feel good and also can have consequences. So we're not denying that it feels good, but like if we just teach them that all the things that could go wrong, that's not enough to deter them from the pleasure. It's just not enough. The pleasure drives you far more. So how about you have pleasure in a safe way?
Yeah.
Go ahead, have pleasure in a safe way. If you're going to do it safely. And if you want pleasure but don't want the consequences that come with it, do it alone.
Yeah.
You self-pleasure, and give people that option. It's like,
yeah, and educate them that it is an option. I love the term solo sex, which is on the Hot Octopus site.
Absolutely, solo sex.
It's a good term.
Yeah, self-loving, self-love, self-care. It's all part of that. Yes, self-care routine,
Yeah, the consent one is it's very difficult. We've yet to kind of go deeply into some of the challenging outcomes of consent failures in our work, and I know we sort of need to go there at some point. And that was what set you off at the beginning on your journey, was working with people in that space.
Exactly. And seeing the impact, because I was seeing children and adolescents and older adolescents, I could see how their sexuality evolved from the point of having been, let's say, molested as children, and how it stunted their growth and the way they they saw sexuality and how it was so easy to see how they are going to have trouble having healthy sexuality, making sense of sex after that kind of experience. So I got very involved for the next 10 years after that in private practice, working with incest survivors and survivors of other kinds of sexual assault. My PhD research was on sexual assault, on incest and attachment, and so there's all kinds of I stayed within that field for quite a long time. So for me, consent has always been there in the back, it's always been an element, but I'm just happy that we're putting the words into the mouths of children in terms of what this, no means no, and what that means, and what is consent, and what does it mean. It's not just submitting to somebody, it's saying yes enthusiastically, and what does that mean. And so, and we have to teach boys how to take no for an answer,
Yeah.
Don't just keep pushing till somebody relents because they want to shut you up. It's like, that just is terrible.
Yeah, it's I mean, the sex education gap and where that leaves people in relation to those challenges is it's a big circle, huh? That failure of information and not knowing that you've got the right to say no, or not understanding the tools to, even without the fully developed frontal cortex,
Right.
to think through what you're about to do.
Right. Which is why we have to get parents on board. Like, the school system is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
It should not be just that the teachers are taxed enough with what they have to do, that giving them this added responsibility when they may not be so comfortable discussing things is unfair. So either getting professionals, sex educators in the schools to do this work, that would be ideal. Getting parents involved in having these discussions. We need to talk about not just consent and pleasure, but porn literacy. The same way we talk about media literacy, we need to do porn literacy. You have 11-year-olds watching porn. This is bad. They're watching sometimes horrible stuff. And we need to be able to have these conversations and not be one of those parents that says, not my kid wouldn't do that, or my kid doesn't do that. And my answer is, yes, they do. You just don't know about it. It's like, most kids have access. Most kids will see it. That is the reality.
Absolutely. I love the idea of sex educators running classes for schools that include classes for parents first.
I do a lot of those. Whenever I go into, a lot of schools will hire me to come and talk to the parents about this. So I do like a whole developmental, like what kids need to know at what age and how to have the conversation and all of that, which is vital. Very, very important.
And do you find then that what you're actually doing is sex education for the parents?
Yeah, essentially. Right. I don't educate kids. That's not my thing. I'm a therapist before I'm an educator, but in the work that I do in general, I am educating the public. I'm educating adults. So yes, educating the parents on, listen, your children are sexual beings. So get a grip, come along for the ride. It's going to be a ride, but you got to get armed with all the right information so that you are not caught off guard and you are not flustered and you are not feeling terribly awkward about it. So if you practice it enough, it will be easier.
Do you have recommended resources for parents who are trying to get themselves ready to talk to their kids when they've got a couple of littlies?
I think there's so many books out there depending on your child's age. I think if you did an Amazon search or Google search for how to talk to your kids about sex, you're going to find many, many different good ones. And I don't know, maybe there's some more recent ones, but for little kids, there's a book that I use with my kids, called What's the Big Secret by Mark Brown, actually, which I loved because it talks about, for 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, talks about masturbation, talks about homosexuality, everything. So that was a book that I use, but I don't know if it's still available.
I'll have to have a look.
There's a lot of good books. Yeah, have a look. It's great little book.
Yeah, are there any other recommendeds that you've loved across your reading or websites or whatever? Anything you're like, oh God, yeah, that was great?
So many. so like if you're talking about solo sex, anything by Betty Dodson, the late
yes.
Betty Dodson, unfortunately she passed. What a wonderful lady. Any work by her for sure. Some of my favorites, Michael Castleman just released a book on great sex, like a nice big book, covers everything. He does some great work as well. The work of Esther Perel, when it comes to relationships and relating. Oh man, there's so many people in my field now that I admire and love and have a lot of respect for. I can't even begin to put it this way. Many of these people, many of the people that I do have admiration, respect for their work, I've had them contribute to the Pornhub site. So many of them are contributing to the site, writing articles, right? So if you want to find more information, and we have a whole bunch of contributors who are all in the field, and you'll be able to see like all of their websites and books and everything that they've done. So if people actually want to go directly there, not search for it, if they go to pornhub.com/sex, believe it or not, that's the way to bypass the actual sex. So you go right to the sex education site. Yeah.
That's good to know. We'll definitely be putting that as part of what we air with this. And so given that you are an expert in your field, I love the word in your bio, sexpert.
Yeah.
And you've got so many tools that you've developed over the years. Do you find yourself comfortably able to navigate issues about sexuality for yourself personally because of that toolkit?
Yes. I mean, I try certainly to practice what I preach. My only problem is finding the time to have sex because I'm so busy, but we find a way. That's about it. But
I hear you.
Yes, of course. I mean, do I have time to practice everything I tell people about? No, clearly not. Like, I'm going to be honest, but certainly try to, and certainly believe in positive sexuality and pleasure and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think it's helpful for people to understand that with the tools that you have, if you learn them and start to apply them, it does make a difference.
Absolutely makes a difference.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have a patient in 3 minutes.
Let you go, but thank you. We'll let you know when this goes to air. It may come back just to check a couple of things. We'll check the bio that we released with you. But thank you, Laurie. Such a pleasure.
That's great. My pleasure. All right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.